Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wading into waters that are incredibly deep and, honestly, quite heavy.
Yeah,
But it's a journey that feels absolutely necessary.
it does.
We're going to be talking about a word that makes most people instinctively, want to look away.
Mhm.
That word is miscarriage.
It is a word that carries a tremendous amount of weight, and often a deafening amount of silence.
It really does. And look, before we even start, I just want to say, if you're listening to this and you've been through it or you're going through it right now, we see you. The source material we're covering today is not a medical textbook. We aren't looking at statistics or biology charts. We're looking at an essay titled simply Miscarriage by the philosopher and writer Pedro Malha.
And this source is so unique because Malha isn't writing from some theoretical distance. This is drawn directly from his own personal experience.
Right?
He's taking the tools of philosophy, his ability to analyze time, identity, and reality, and he's applying them to this very raw, very personal trauma.
Which gives it such an intimate perspective. It's not a doctor telling you what happened. It's a human being trying to make sense of a world that just shattered.
Precisely. And because he's a philosopher, he's doing something more than just recounting a sad story. He's analyzing what this loss actually does to a person's sense of existence.
He's arguing that we need to look at this not just as a biological failure, but as a profound philosophical rupture.
Yeah.
He starts right off the bat by acknowledging that instinct we all have to turn away. He says the word itself feels heavy in the mouth.
It asks us to sit with something we'd rather avoid.
But our mission today is to do exactly what Malha asks.
Yep.
To look directly at this disappearance that feels impossible to explain.
And to really understand his central argument that when a miscarriage happens, you don't just mourn a baby, you mourn a future that had already begun.
So let's unpack that, because Malha makes this really important distinction right at the beginning between the abstract word miscarriage and how it actually, enters a life.
It's a crucial distinction. Miscarriage is a static noun. It sounds clean, almost clinical.
Right, like a diagnosis.
Exactly. But Malha writes that it doesn't arrive as a word. It arrives as blood, or a phone call, or a sentence spoken too carefully in a clinical room.
Ugh, that description gave me chills. Spoken too carefully.
It's so specific.
It is. It captures that moment where the whole tone of the room shifts before you even hear the news. You just know something is wrong from the cadence of the doctor's voice.
And he talks about how that shock then moves through ordinary spaces. That's the jarring part. It's not always this big emergency room drama.
Oh.
You might be just sitting on the edge of your bed or at work staring at a spreadsheet. He mentions hands on a stomach that just feels different.
It's the abruptness. One moment, the world has a certain alignment, a future is forming. The next, there is just absence.
And there's no script for it.
That's what's so fascinating and heartbreaking. He points out there are forms to sign, sure, practicalities, but there is no ceremony.
That's a huge point. If you lose a parent, a spouse, society has a script. We have funerals, people bring food, there's a gathering. We have a shared language for that kind of death.
But here he says you are bereaved and there is no funeral.
It's a secret grief.
You're just waiting in corridors or going home carrying something that, as he puts it, no longer has a place to land.
You're holding this massive grief, but there's no grave to visit, no public obituary. You walk back out onto the street and the traffic is still moving. People are buying coffee.
And your entire world has ended. And this leads us to what I think is the core philosophical insight of the essay. If we want to understand why this hurts so much, we have to talk about what Malha calls the architecture of the future.
This is the part that really shifts your perspective. Because I think people who haven't experienced it, they tend to think, well, the baby wasn't born yet.
Right. So you lost a potential. You lost a maybe.
Exactly. They think you're grieving an idea or a daydream.
But Malha argues it's so much more than that. He writes, a child does not begin in the body.
A child begins in imagined tomorrows.
Imagine tomorrows. That is such a beautiful and devastating phrase. What does he mean by that, practically?
Well, think about what happens when someone finds out they're pregnant. Even if it's unplanned. Even if they're terrified. Malha says time bends.
You start living ahead of yourself.
Yes. And it's not even a conscious choice. It's just a cognitive shift that happens.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he lists these small details that are so relatable. You start renaming rooms in your mind. That's not the guest room anymore.
That's the nursery.
You look at a calendar, and you aren't just seeing next week, you're seeing 9 months from now. That due date becomes the new center of your gravity.
You start speaking in the plural.
We need a bigger car. We need to move closer to the park. All of it.
That is the internal shift. Life stops being just about the present. You're picturing conversations that haven't happened. You're worrying about school gates for a child the size of a blueberry.
It's not just daydreaming. It's an emotional restructuring of your reality. You're building a house in a future that doesn't exist yet.
Right, and so when that pregnancy ends, you aren't just snapping back to the present.
No. You are left with this whole future that has nowhere to go.
And Mala emphasizes that imagined futures are not light. They have weight. They organize your hope, your identity. When that future is just removed, your identity has to reorganize itself around an absence. The whole scaffolding collapses.
That's the key, isn't it? It's not just the loss of the child. It's the loss of the parent you had started to become.
Precisely. The mother who had started speaking inwardly to someone. The father who had pictured those tiny shoes by the door. That version of you dies too.
And that is a profound loss of self that goes completely unrecognized by the world. You have to mourn the person you were going to be.
A ghost version of yourself you have to let go of.
And while all this psychological, this philosophical stuff is happening, this collapse of the future, there's still the brutal physical reality. Mala has this phrase that really stuck with me. Biology lingers.
This is where the cruelty of the biology comes in. The body just doesn't update as fast as the facts.
So your mind knows it's over. The doctor knows.
Yeah.
But the body.
The body is still going. The hormones are surging for a future that is now gone.
So you're physically exhausted. You might be nauseous. Your body is prepping for a baby. But there's no baby.
It's like the body is still trying to protect something that isn't there. And Malha notes that the exhaustion remains without explanation. You have all the physical toll of early pregnancy, but without the prize at the end. It's labor without the child.
We should probably talk about the dynamic between couples here, too, because Mala touches on this in a way that feels very true and very difficult.
It's a shared loss, but it's an unequal experience. It has to be.
How so?
Well, one body is enduring the bleeding, the physical trauma, the hormonal crash. That's a visceral, somatic experience. The other partner carries a unique kind of helplessness.
Watching someone you love go through something you just can't fix.
Right. But they are both standing in what he calls the same disappearance.
Yeah.
But because there's no shared language for it, they often struggle to find a way to grieve together. It can be a very isolated grief, even within a marriage.
And speaking of systems that don't know how to handle this, we have to talk about the medical system. Malha is, well, he's pretty scathing.
It's a really critical critique. He argues that our systems are designed for efficiency, not for remembrance.
They're designed to fix bodies, not hold grief.
Exactly. There's that one line that just hit me like a ton of bricks. He says, "A child became an appointment."
Stark, isn't it?
Incredibly. A child became an appointment. He talks about forms being signed, bright lights, tissue being removed. Modern medicine knows how to manage biology. It knows how to ensure physical safety.
But it does not know how to hold what has vanished.
It's sterile. It treats it like a procedure. We need to remove this tissue. But for the parents, that tissue was a whole life, a whole future.
And that disconnect is so traumatizing. You're being emptied of a future in a room built for clinical efficiency. It minimizes the event. It treats it as a medical hiccup rather than a death.
And you're often sitting in a waiting room next to people who are there for happy ultrasounds, holding pictures of their babies while you are losing yours.
Oh God, the waiting room. He described that as a special kind of hell.
It is. And that minimization, it continues outside the hospital, right? I mean, people say the worst things when they're trying to be helpful.
They really do. And look, I think it usually comes from a good place. People want to fix it. They want to offer hope.
Of course.
But Malha points out why the standard hopeful phrases are so damaging. Phrases like, "at least it was early," or the big one, "you can try again."
You can try again.
Why is that so wrong? I mean, on the surface, it's factually true. You can physically try again. Why does Mala say that's such a violation?
Because it assumes that children are interchangeable. It assumes the goal is just to have a baby, any baby. But Mala argues that each imagined child is singular. It had its own emotional architecture.
Right, you bonded with that specific possibility. You had a name for that child.
Exactly. A new pregnancy is a new story. It does not resurrect the one that ended. When you say, "you can try again," you're essentially telling someone to just replace a lost loved one.
You would never say that to someone who lost a spouse. "Oh, don't worry, you can get married again."
Never. It denies the reality of the grief. It suggests the loss wasn't real because the person wasn't finished.
That makes so much sense. And this leads into what Malha calls the quiet social erasure. Because this happens in private, in bathrooms, in early scans. Nobody sees it.
It leaves no public trace, there's no body to bury, and because of that, there is this immense pressure to just return to normalcy.
To go back to work the next day, to stand in the supermarket line, do the school run for your other kids, as if nothing catastrophic just happened.
Yeah.
He mentions these triggers in the mundane world. It's not the big tragic moments. It's walking down the supermarket aisle and seeing baby clothes.
Or opening a medical letter that arrives 3 months late because the system didn't update. Or just slowing down on the sidewalk when you pass a pushchair.
These are small moments, but they are heavy. They're reminders that something once existed here.
And this brings us back to that idea of time. Mala suggests that miscarriage fundamentally breaks your trust in time.
How so?
Well, we are, as he calls us, future-bearing creatures. We are hardwired to look forward. We assume cause and effect. We assume that if life begins, it continues.
And miscarriage teaches you that the future is fragile. It breaks that assumption of continuity.
So you become cautious with hope. Or maybe, conversely, desperate for it. But you can no longer naively trust that because something has begun, it will finish.
That structural wound, as he calls it, changes how you move through the world. You realize that time doesn't always keep its promises.
That's a haunting thought, isn't it?
It is. It makes every subsequent pregnancy feel like walking on ice.
And that realization lingers long after the physical recovery. It changes the texture of joy and anticipation.
You know, reading this, I kept waiting for the "it gets better" part, or the "here is how you heal" part. But Mala's pretty clear that's not what this essay is for.
No, and I think that is its greatest strength. He explicitly says, this essay does not offer healing. It offers recognition.
That distinction is huge.
Huh.
Healing implies fixing. Recognition just says, this is real.
It validates the experience. The core takeaway he offers is that the love was real. The future, however brief it was real.
And the child entered the inner architecture of a life, even if they never entered the parent's arms.
That line really stayed with me, that a child can change you without ever arriving.
It reframes the loss not as a failure, but as a significant event that deserves to be honored. He says miscarriage leaves people standing in ordinary rooms, holding extraordinary absence.
Extraordinary absence.
Yeah.
And that absence has weight. It deserves to be named. It deserves to be held, not just gotten over.
It really does. You know, we talk about a lot of topics on this show. Usually we're trying to make you smarter about economics or history or tech.
Yeah.
This is different. This feels like we're trying to give words to a silence.
And that is often the most important work we can do. To give language to the things that leave us speechless. If you have the language, you feel less crazy.
You feel less alone.
Right. You realize that your grief isn't a malfunction. It's a measure of the love you had.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to go back to something Mala said about memory. He says that what remains is a subtle reshaping of time, that certain songs or streets or seasons now carry associations that can't be explained.
And that's not pathology. That isn't being stuck or dwelling on the negative. That is memory doing its work. It's the persistence of love in the face of absence.
It's how the child remains part of the family narrative, even in silence. If you're listening to this and you're holding that kind of absence right now, I hope this discussion made it feel just a little bit less invisible. Mala's essay is a testament to the fact that your loss matters, your grief is valid, and that future you imagined.
It was real.
It was real, and it's okay to mourn it. Here's a final thought to leave you with, something that struck me as I was processing all of this. We live in a world that is obsessed with moving on. We want closure. We want the rainbow after the storm.
Yeah, the next chapter.
Exactly. But Mala's perspective challenges us to just sit still, to stop trying to rush past the pain. If we are future-bearing creatures, as he says, maybe the bravest thing we can do after a loss like this isn't to immediately try and build a new future,
But to just stand in the present.
and acknowledge the one that didn't happen. To let that ghost version of ourselves exist for a moment longer before we have to let it go.
That's a profound thought. We don't need to rush the silence.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.